In the pre-dawn darkness of October 6, 2025, an explosion ripped through the silence of Gandhi Vihar, a quiet residential neighborhood in North Delhi. Flames erupted from a fourth-floor window, painting the night sky in angry shades of orange and red. Neighbors stumbled from their beds, hearts pounding, eyes wide with shock. By the time firefighters arrived and battled the blaze under control, all that remained was ash, twisted metal, and a body burned beyond recognition. It looked like a tragic accident, a faulty gas cylinder perhaps, or some electrical malfunction. Just another sad statistic in a city of 20 million people. But this was no accident. This was murder, and the person who orchestrated it was a 21-year-old forensic science student who believed she had the knowledge to commit the perfect crime. She was wrong. Delhi in 2025 is a city of dreamers. Every year, hundreds of thousands of young people pour into its crowded neighborhoods, renting tiny rooms in aging buildings, sacrificing comfort and sometimes even dignity, all for a chance at success. Among them was Ramkesh Meena, a 32-year-old man from Rajasthan who had been chasing one of India's most elusive dreams, becoming an IAS officer through the UPSC examination. It's the kind of test that breaks people. Out of 1 million applicants each year, only a few hundred make it. The rest spend years in limbo, studying 16 hours a day, watching their youth slip away in libraries and cramped rooms, always thinking that maybe next year will be different. Ramkesh had been at it for years. He lived alone in a rented flat, E60, on the 4th floor, in Gandhi Vihar, part of the T-Marpur area in North Delhi. The building was unremarkable, the kind of structure you'd walk past without a second glance. Narrow staircases, thin walls, and small flats where ambition and desperation lived side by side. His world consisted of textbooks, practice papers, and the constant pressure of knowing that time was running out. At 32, he was already older than most aspirants. Society whispers when you're still preparing for exams at that age. Family members ask pointed questions. Friends move on with their lives. The isolation becomes its own prison. But then, in May 2025, something changed. Ramkesh met a girl named Amrita. She was 21, bright-eyed, studying for a bachelor's degree in forensic science. They met during some kind of job interview in Noida, one of those casual encounters that sometimes spark into something more. There was chemistry. Within weeks, they were involved. By summer, Amrita had moved into Ramkesh's flat, a live-in relationship, still somewhat taboo in traditional Indian society, but increasingly common among the urban young who value companionship over ceremony. From the outside, things looked fine. Amrita was active on social media, posting selfies and short video reels, where she lip-synced to trending Bollywood songs. Her Instagram account showed a young woman full of life, smiling at the camera with that particular confidence of someone who believes the future holds good things. She uploaded her last video on September 30th, a transition reel, the kind that was popular that month. In it, she transformed from one look to another, her face bright with artificial light and carefully applied filters. It was 5 days before she would help orchestrate a murder. But beneath the surface, something dark was growing. Ramkesh had a secret. He had been recording intimate videos of Amrita without her knowledge or consent. Private moments that should have existed only in memory were instead being captured, stored, archived on a hard disk like files in some grotesque digital collection. And Amrita wasn't the only one. Police would later discover that Ramkesh had similar videos of approximately 15 other women, all recorded without permission, all stored for reasons only he understood. When Amrita discovered the recordings, her world collapsed. Imagine the violation, the betrayal, the sickening realization that someone you trusted, someone you shared your body and your space with, had been secretly documenting your most vulnerable moments. She confronted him. She demanded he delete the videos. She begged, she pleaded, and Ramkesh refused. As September wore on and their relationship deteriorated, Ramkesh did something even worse. He started sending Amrita their private videos. Whether it was an attempt to win her back through some twisted logic, or a form of control, or simply cruelty, we'll never know. What we do know is that it felt like blackmail wrapped in the language of a relationship. Every video he sent was a reminder of what he possessed: what he could do with it, how powerless she was to stop him. Amrita was trapped, and she was alone. More than a year earlier, on July 8, 2024, her own family had formally disowned her. They had taken out a newspaper advertisement, cold, public, permanent, stating they were severing all ties, disinheriting her from family property, washing their hands of whatever she did from that moment forward. So when she needed help, when she needed someone to turn to, there was no family safety net to catch her fall. Instead, she turned to Sumit Kashyap, her ex-boyfriend, 27 years old, from the city of Moradabad in Uttar Pradesh, about 160 kilometers from Delhi. Sumit worked as an LPG cylinder distributor. When Amrita told him what Ramkesh had done, told him about the videos and the refusal and the manipulation, Sumit's response was immediate. "We need to teach him a lesson," he said. And with those words, a boundary was crossed. This wasn't going to be a confrontation or a legal complaint. This was going to be violence. Sumit brought in a friend, Sandeep Kumar, 29, who was preparing for his own government exam, the SSC CGL. 3 people now, united by anger and a plan that was taking shape in the dark corners of rage and wounded pride. But Amrita wasn't just any scorned partner plotting revenge. She was studying forensic science. She spent her days learning about crime scene investigation, about how murders are detected, about evidence collection and analysis. She watched true crime series obsessively, absorbing the narratives of killers and detectives, studying the mistakes that got people caught. And sitting there with Sumit and Sandeep, planning in hushed voices, she believed she could use everything she'd learned to commit a murder that would never be solved. They would kill Ramkesh. They would destroy the evidence. And they would make it look like a tragic accident, a gas cylinder explosion, common enough in Indian households that nobody would question it. The perfect crime, planned by someone who understood exactly how crimes are investigated. The date was set, October 5th, and as that night approached, Ramkesh Meena had no idea he was living his final days. October 5th, 2025 was a Saturday. The city was settling into weekend rhythms, some people out at restaurants and malls, others at home with family. The usual chaos of Delhi slowly quieting as midnight approached. In Gandhi Vihar, most residents were already asleep, dreaming away the hours before dawn. Ramkesh Meena was alone in flat E60, or at least he thought he was alone. Amrita wasn't there. She'd gone back to Moradabad, or so he believed. He couldn't have known that she was actually traveling toward Delhi at that very moment, sitting in a vehicle with 2 men whose faces would be the last thing he'd ever see. Around 2:18 in the morning, the building's CCTV camera captured something unusual. 2 figures approached the entrance. Their faces were covered with masks, not medical masks, but cloth coverings that concealed their identities. They moved with purpose, not the stumbling uncertainty of drunk neighbors returning home, but the deliberate steps of people on a mission. They entered the building. They climbed the stairs. No security guard challenged them. No neighbor opened a door to see who was making noise at that ungodly hour. They reached the 4th floor and waited in the shadows. Minutes later, a 3rd person arrived, a young woman. She didn't wear a mask because she didn't need to. She belonged there. This was her building, her flat, her key in the lock. Amrita Chauhan opened the door to E60 and let the masked men inside. What happened in the next 39 minutes was brutal and calculated. According to what investigators would later piece together from confessions and evidence, Amrita may have initially restrained Ramkesh, perhaps tying him up under some false pretense, a moment of intimacy or playfulness that he never saw turning deadly. When he was vulnerable, when he couldn't fight back effectively, the 2 men entered from wherever they'd been hiding. The confrontation was about the hard disk. Where was it? Where were the videos stored? But whether Ramkesh refused to tell them, or whether they had simply decided this needed to end permanently, violence erupted fast and fierce. They beat him, fists and maybe other objects connecting with flesh and bone, and then they choked him. Hands or rope or fabric around his throat, cutting off air, cutting off pleas, cutting off life itself. Ramkesh struggled. Of course he struggled. 32 years of existence doesn't surrender easily. But 3 against 1, surprise and restraints and fury, he had no chance. His hands clawed uselessly. His vision darkened. His lungs burned for oxygen that wouldn't come. And then finally, stillness. When Ramkesh stopped moving, when his body went slack and his eyes stared at nothing, the real work began. This is where Amrita's forensic training came into play. Fire destroys evidence. Everyone knows that. But for fire to truly eliminate DNA, fingerprints, trace evidence, you need extreme heat sustained over time. So they prepared the body. They went to the kitchen and returned with cooking oil. They poured it over Ramkesh's corpse, soaking his clothes, his skin, his hair. Then came ghee, clarified butter that burns hot and long, then wine, the alcohol acting as an accelerant. The body was drenched, saturated with flammable liquids that would feed the flames they were about to ignite. Sumit, with his professional experience as an LPG distributor, knew exactly how to stage a cylinder explosion. He disconnected the cylinder from the kitchen stove, carefully carried it to where Ramkesh's body lay, and positioned it near the head. He opened the regulator valve slowly. Gas began to hiss out, invisible, odorless propane spreading through the room, mixing with air, creating the volatile conditions for an explosion. They worked quickly now, adrenaline and fear speeding their movements. They grabbed what they'd come for, the hard disk that contained all those videos, the original source of this nightmare. They took Ramkesh's shirt, his phones, anything that might link them to him. And then, in what they must have thought was a stroke of brilliance, they locked the flat's gate from the inside. There was a small hole in the mesh, just big enough to reach through and manipulate the lock. When police arrived, it would appear that the flat had been sealed from within when the fire started. It would look like Ramkesh had been alone. It would look like an accident. At 2:57 a.m., the CCTV camera captured two people leaving the building. A man whose face was still masked, and a woman whose features were clear in the dim light of the stairwell. Amrita Chauhan and one of her accomplices, walking away from the scene, walking away from the body, walking away from the life they'd just taken. They had barely reached the street when Sumit flicked his lighter. The small flame touched the alcohol-soaked body. Fire erupted instantly, spreading faster than thought, consuming fabric and flesh, racing across the oil and ghee, filling the room with heat and light and choking smoke. The flames reached the leaking gas from the cylinder. For one frozen moment, the room held its breath, and then the explosion. The blast was catastrophic. Windows shattered outward, sending glass into the night like deadly rain. The door blew off its hinges. Flames roared through the flat, so hot they began melting metal fixtures. The sound woke the entire neighborhood, a thunderous crack that split the pre-dawn silence and had people stumbling to windows in terror and confusion. By the time anyone realized what had happened, by the time someone called emergency services, Amrita was miles away, sitting in a vehicle heading back to Moradabad. And Ramkesh Meena was nothing but ash and charred bone in the ruins of his rented room. His dreams of civil service, his years of preparation, his whole complicated, flawed life reduced to evidence in a crime scene he would never know he'd become part of. When firefighters arrived at Gandhi Vihar around 3 a.m, they found a scene of devastation. The fourth-floor flat was completely destroyed, walls blackened, ceiling collapsed, and in the center of it all, a body burned so badly it was almost unrecognizable as human. The fire was brought under control, but the damage was done. This was a job for the police now. Initial assessment suggested accident. Gas cylinder explosions weren't uncommon in India. Faulty equipment, human error, aging infrastructure. These things happened, tragic but not unexpected. The body would need to be identified through dental records or personal effects. A case was registered under sections related to death by negligence. DCP Raja Banthia and his team began the standard protocols for such incidents. But something wasn't sitting right. The burn pattern was unusual. The intensity of the fire suggested multiple accelerants, not just gas. And the timing bothered investigators. Who's using a gas stove at 3 a.m? Most cylinder accidents happen during cooking hours, during the day when people are preparing meals. An explosion at this hour raised questions that couldn't be easily answered by the accident theory. So they checked the CCTV footage. And that's when everything changed. The building's surveillance system had been recording all night, capturing everyone who entered or exited. When investigators sat down to review the files, scanning through hours of empty hallways and dark stairwells, they found something that made their blood run cold. At 2:18 a.m., about 40 minutes before the explosion, two people entered the building. Their faces were covered with masks. Why would anyone need to hide their identity unless they were planning something criminal? This wasn't COVID precaution. This was deliberate concealment. The investigators watched as the masked figures moved through the frame and disappeared up the stairs. They fast-forwarded. At 2:57 a.m., one of the masked men left, and then moments later, a second figure, another masked man, walked out with a woman. The woman's face was visible, captured in profile by the camera mounted above the entrance. She was young, early 20s maybe, and minutes after they left the building, the explosion occurred. The timeline was damning. The correlation between their departure and the blast couldn't be coincidence. This wasn't an accident. This was murder, carefully planned and deliberately executed. But who was the woman? Who were the masked men? And why would anyone want to kill Ramkesh Meena? The investigation shifted gears immediately. This was now a murder case, and murder cases required different protocols, different resources, different urgency. Police began pulling records on everyone associated with the victim. They contacted Ramkesh's family in Rajasthan, who mentioned he'd been living with a girlfriend, a live-in partner. Her name was Amrita. The technical team obtained Amrita's phone records and began analyzing her call detail records, the digital fingerprint that every mobile phone leaves behind as it pings cell towers. The data was unambiguous. Amrita's phone had been near E Block, Gandhi Vihar, at the exact time of the incident. Her location data placed her at the scene, and immediately after the explosion, her phone went dark, switched off. No calls, no messages, no location pings. She had vanished from the grid. For investigators, a phone going silent right after a crime is like a neon sign flashing guilty. Innocent people don't turn off their phones when their partners die in fires. They call for help, they call family, they call police. They don't disappear. Unless they know exactly what happened because they made it happen. Why hadn't she reported her partner's death? Why had she been at the scene and then immediately fled? These questions hung in the air of the police station like smoke as teams mobilized for a manhunt. The digital forensics team worked around the clock. They enhanced the CCTV footage, trying to get better images of the masked men, looking for identifying features, height, build, gait, anything. They pulled cell tower data for all phones in the area during the critical window. They found that 3 phones had traveled together from Moradabad to Delhi that night. 3 phones that had been in Gandhi Vihar at 2:30 a.m. 3 phones that left the area right before the explosion, and one of them belonged to Amrita Chauhan. Meanwhile, forensic experts were examining what remained of the crime scene. Despite the intense fire, evidence always survives if you know where to look. The burn pattern on the floor showed multiple points of origin, characteristic of accelerant use. They found residue of oil and alcohol. The position of the gas cylinder was wrong, placed in a way that made no sense for normal use. And most damning, the lock on the flat's gate showed manipulation from the outside through the mesh hole. Someone had locked it after leaving, trying to make it appear the victim had been alone inside. But it was the hard disk that became the key. Ramkesh's family mentioned he'd been having trouble with Amrita, something about private videos. When detectives learned this detail, the motive suddenly made terrible sense. This wasn't a random killing. This was personal. This was about violation and revenge. This was about digital evidence that someone desperately wanted to retrieve or destroy. Police teams were dispatched to Moradabad, armed with arrest warrants and photographs. They conducted raids across the city, checking known addresses, interviewing family members. On October 18th, 12 days after the murder, they found her. Amrita Chauhan was apprehended, her phone still switched off, her attempt to disappear thwarted by the digital trail she'd left behind. In the interrogation room, under the harsh fluorescent lights and the weight of undeniable evidence, Amrita's carefully constructed world fell apart. The CCTV footage, the cell tower data, the forensic analysis. It was all there, irrefutable and damning. And finally, exhausted or relieved or simply broken, she confessed. She told them everything: the videos, the blackmail, the planning, the murder, the fire, and she gave them names. Sumit Kashyap and Sandeep Kumar, her accomplices in this nightmare. Armed with Amrita's confession, police moved swiftly. On October 21st, Sumit Kashyap was arrested in Moradabad. 2 days later, Sandeep Kumar was taken into custody. During searches of their residences and vehicles, police recovered crucial evidence: the hard disk that had started it all, still containing those private videos of Amrita and 14 other women, a trolley bag they'd used to transport their materials, 2 mobile phones, and Ramkesh's shirt, blood-stained and hidden but not destroyed. The media descended on the story like hawks. A UPSC aspirant murdered by his forensic science student girlfriend with help from her ex-boyfriend. It had all the elements of a Bollywood thriller, except this was real, and the body in the morgue wasn't an actor who'd get up when the director yelled cut. Special Commissioner Ravindra Yadav held a press conference, explaining how the investigation had unfolded. She used her forensic knowledge to plan what she thought would be a perfect crime, he told reporters. She understood evidence destruction. She knew about accelerants and fire patterns. She even manipulated the crime scene to look like an accident. But she forgot the most basic rule of modern investigation: you can't hide from digital evidence. CCTV cameras, cell phone towers, location data. These are the invisible witnesses of our age, recording everything, forgetting nothing. Amrita had focused so intensely on the physical crime scene that she'd overlooked the digital web surrounding it. She'd forgotten that cameras watched the building entrance. She'd left her phone on, broadcasting her location to every tower in range. She'd thought like a forensic student, but not like someone who understood that theoretical knowledge doesn't equal practical criminal expertise. The case sent shockwaves through Delhi and beyond. Here was a young woman educated from a middle-class background who had orchestrated a brutal murder with clinical precision. Here was a UPSC aspirant, dead at 32, killed not by the famous difficulty of the examination, but by his own violations, recording women without consent, using those recordings as tools of control. Ramkesh's family mourned, but their grief was complicated by the revelations about what he'd done. 15 women violated, 15 sets of intimate moments stolen and archived. Had he lived, he might have faced criminal charges under India's IT Act for those recordings. Instead, his victims became footnotes in a murder case. Their videos now evidence in a trial, their privacy violated yet again in the service of justice. For Amrita, Sumit, and Sandeep, the future stretched ahead like a dark tunnel with no visible end. They faced murder charges under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, plus conspiracy, evidence tampering, and mischief by fire. If convicted, they would spend years, perhaps decades behind bars. Amrita's family, who had disowned her 17 months earlier, remained silent. That newspaper advertisement from July 2024 had proven prophetic. They truly had nothing to do with her actions anymore. The case also sparked broader conversations that extended far beyond this single tragedy, about digital consent and the epidemic of revenge porn in India, where studies show 27% of young internet users have experienced image-based sexual abuse, yet 98% never report it because of stigma and shame. About the crushing pressure on UPSC aspirants, living in isolation, competing for a tiny number of positions in an examination with a success rate below 1%. About live-in relationships and the legal protections, or lack thereof, for partners who aren't married. About forensic science education and whether students need more ethics training alongside their technical skills. But perhaps the most haunting question was the simplest one. Could all of this have been prevented? If Ramkesh had deleted those videos when Amrita first asked, he would still be alive, still preparing for his exam, still dreaming of civil service. If Amrita had reported the videos to police instead of planning murder, she wouldn't be facing life in prison. If families and society provided better support systems for young people in crisis, maybe neither of them would have ended up where they did. The investigation concluded, but the case continues to wind through India's legal system. 3 young lives on trial, 1 young life ended, a hard disk full of violated privacy sitting in an evidence locker, the spark that ignited everything, and somewhere in the charred remains of flat E60 in Gandhi Vihar, the ghost of a question. At what point does violation justify vengeance? At what point does vengeance become murder? And in the end, when the fire burns away everything but truth, what are we left with except ash and regret and the cold understanding that violence solves nothing? It only creates more victims, more tragedy, more stories like this one that haunt us long after the flames go out. So what do you think? Was this inevitable from the moment Ramkesh pressed record on that first video? Could 3 lives have been saved if someone, anyone, had made different choices? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, in an age where everything is recorded, where privacy is precious and easily violated, consent isn't just important, it's everything.